Because in verse 9, you've got where some of the Orthodox Jews, certainly the Synagogue, which was a particular one of the Libertines and Cyrenians and Alexandrians, and of Cilicia and Asia. Now, these are people that are from the synagogues, but it's obvious that they are coming to accept Jesus, but they are in disagreement with Stephen. And I'm assuming that this was becoming a religious debate between Orthodox Jews and those who we would nowadays call Messianic Jews. And yet, in verse 10, it says absolutely clearly, they couldn't resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spoke. And you know, this is extremely interesting because here you've got people, the Orthodox Jews, debating with these new disciples of Jesus. And yet, when the Holy Spirit is on Stephen, his argument was so strong that they could not dispute him. They disagreed with him, but they could not defeat his argument. And you know, it's such a powerful thing. I often tell people that if you're in ministry, your strongest argument is your personal testimony. And I know quite recently, it's only months ago as I'm speaking, that I was in Kyrgyzstan and called on to speak, and I was warned, the head of the KGB, this is in recent times, still influenced by the communists, and he came to me in the hotel and warned me that he would be in the meeting and would listen, and if I said anything wrong, I'd be thrown out the country. So, I mean, this can even apply today. And so I sought the Lord, and the Lord said to me, share your testimony, share the testimony. I've got a powerful testimony, healed of cancer twice, released from prison, and all the miracles and so on. And I spent that first night in actually referring to my own personal experience. And this man who had power to throw me out of the country came to me afterwards and said, I couldn't find anything wrong with what you said. And you know, as Christians, we need to have a testimony and a witness, and that is the strength of our preaching. So they couldn't find ways to resist him, but yes, what did they do? All right, by verse 11, they did the sneaky bit, because they suborned men to lie, yes, and saying, we heard this Stephen speak blasphemous words against Moses and against God. Now, you know, this is a danger. In fact, I found this when I was in the prison, that one of the difficulties was you got sentenced for what you've done, in my case, Bible smuggling. But even the British consul warned me that they would find, if they could, some way to accuse me of other offences in the prison. And I saw how they did it, where they would get your cellmates to lie and say, in particular case, one man, he's the first one I led to the Lord, actually, and he was accused by his cellmates of speaking against the president, and he got an extra 2 years in prison for that. So this is nothing new. They've simply persuaded these men to lie and say that he was speaking blasphemy against Moses and against God. And in verse 12, so they stirred up the people. They stirred up the people, the elders, the scribes, and they, these are the religious leaders, came on him, caught him, and brought him before the council. So now you see Stephen is accused that in the gospel he's preaching, he's guilty of blasphemy because he's speaking against Orthodox Jewish teaching. Basically, this is the argument. It is the argument in Israel today, that you are not allowed to speak against the Orthodox Jewish teaching. They threw me out of Israel for exactly that. I know. They accused me of being a missionary and that what I was saying, but they were lying, because I speak as a Christian. And I was even told by a lawyer there that even in Israel, if you're speaking to Jews, if you're sharing a testimony as a Christian, they cannot argue against you. This is quite serious. So it says they brought him before the council, and in verse 13, what did they do? They set up false witnesses. So here they're admitting, in the Bible it admits they were lying, false witnesses. And they said, this man ceases not to speak blasphemous words against the holy place. I'm assuming that's the temple and the law. And then in verse 14, you see how deep this accusation is. Because in verse 14, they say that we've heard him say that this Jesus of Nazareth has said he will destroy this place. Well, you see, it just shows what a total misunderstanding, because what Jesus actually said, he was stood in the temple and he was really saying, destroy this body, and he meant his own body, that he would die and be resurrected. He wasn't talking about the temple, and Jesus had no intention of destroying the temple, but they misunderstood and distorted the words he said when he's saying, if you destroy this temple, I will raise it up again in 3 days. But he was speaking about his resurrection. So this now emerges again in the early church, that they're accusing Stephen of repeating the words of Jesus. So the interesting thing is what happened in verse 15. Because in verse 15 you see a wonderful testimony, and to me this is an incredible testimony. All of these Orthodox Jews sitting in the council, looking at him, saw his face as if it had been the face of an angel. Wow, what a testimony.